I just can't afford to eat ancestrally. That's something that Andrea and I hear all the time. And we get that the mainstream shop bought side of ancestral eating can sometimes be eye-wateringly expensive. Notwithstanding that, both Andrea and I have been eating this way on a very tight budget for over a decade each. We're going to show you that it is possible. In this second part, we'll complete our list of 50 ways to save money on an ancestral diet. If you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go back and check out that episode before diving in here, and head to the show notes to print the full 50 ways. If you'd like to be part of a vibrant ancestral food community where we're talking about this and all the other kitchen things, come join us on Patreon. The link for that's in the show notes too. Meantime, let's get saving you money. Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen podcast with Alison, a European town dweller in central Italy, and Andrea, living on a newly created family farm in northwest Washington State, USA. Pull up a chair at the table and join us as we talk about eating, cooking, and living with ancient ancestral food wisdom in a modern world kitchen.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, Alison.
Hello. How are you doing today?
I am ready to save some money with my ancestral diet.
Me too. Let me get to the rest of those points.
So we had a part 1 already where we talked about ways to save money in an ancestral kitchen. And we had 17 ideas for the sourcing of your food. And then we covered 6 ideas under ingredients. And today we're going to go over some ideas for saving money. And we've categorized them under stock, kitchen routines, home tasks, and then we have kind of a miscellaneous section of things that didn't seem to fit anywhere else. And then at the end, Allison, I hope you're ready because I'm going to ask you, and you should ask me, if you could do one thing to save money in your kitchen, what's that one thing going to be? Like the biggest gung ho, whatever, bang for your buck type thing. Okay. So we'll share each of those at the end.
Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. So before we go, do you have any any delicious, wonderful reviews to tell me about?
I do. I have a review from Jen Brown, who left us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts.
Oh, I love it.
And titled her review Love, followed by 2 exclamation marks.
Oh.
And she says, this podcast has been life-changing and such a joy to listen to as I'm carting my kiddos around. I'm excited to add things back into our diets and lifestyles that I saw my nanny doing while I was growing up. Excited to do Alison's rye sourdough class to start the adventure into sourdough. Thank you, ladies. This is needed and you do it so well.
Thank you, Jen. That's
Yes,
cool
thank you.
that she saw her nanny doing. Did you say nanny or nan?
Yes.
Yeah, that's cool that she saw her doing that, and then she's bringing stuff back in.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like looking behind the veil, like, oh, that's how you're doing that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel that about things my mom did when I was growing up, and then as an adult, I'm like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah. Oh, so it's nice and early for you. We always record nice and early for Andrea. Have you managed to have some food yet this morning?
Actually, no, but I want to tell you what I had for breakfast yesterday because it's the same thing I'm going to have as soon as we're done recording. So we have basically in this household become addicted to your oatcakes. None of us can move on. We're stuck.
You don't have to move on. You can stay there if you want.
Yeah, we're happy. So we, what we started doing is we grind the oats for a double batch because we don't have oat flour, and we grind them. And we found them. We tried grinding them less and less, and we found the perfect place where we like them. If you have a Vitamix, we grind them on the level 1. And so we grind them. They're very coarse. And then We mix it up just as per the cookbook instructions. Please buy the cookbook. Link in show
Mm-hmm.
notes. So we mix them up per the recipe instructions that you put in the cookbook, and then we set the bowl on the counter where it can ferment overnight, and then it just stays there until we've eaten it, which takes maybe 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
And then when the bowl's almost empty and there's just a little bit left, we start it again.
What
So
What are you using as your starter in the bowl?
we just put in sourdough starter.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I do
And
too.
because we always have plenty of sourdough starter because we've got 2 quart jars going full all the time right
Yeah.
now, then we probably don't have to add more starter every time because we intentionally
Mm.
do it before we don't wash the bowl out or anything. We just keep
Yeah.
refilling it.
Yeah.
So it has a little back slop in there, but
Mm.
yeah, we're making it anyway. So I made make now I've kind of gotten into Allison's like, how big can I make this thing and flip it over without it breaking? So
Yeah.
so we're making a
How big can
huge
you make them?
I don't know, probably not as big as your squash pancakes yet, but about
Yeah.
as big as my pan right now.
Oh, that's
So
good.
yeah, so put it on and it's kind of thick, right? So I sort of
Mm.
stand there like in a meditation, sort of like patting it with a spatula,
Mm.
getting it all flat. And then when I flip it and the
Mm.
bottom is nice and crispy because I put lard on the pan first, then I
Yeah.
sprinkle some coarse salt on that.
Oh, nice.
And then once it's nice and cooked, I put it on the plate, scramble a couple eggs, and then usually we have some kind of meat, like beef or something from the night before, either sitting on the stove or whatever, and I'll shred some of the on, sometimes instead of the egg or sometimes with egg or whatever, depends on if I have
Mm.
it. And then it just becomes like, what can I find? So sauerkraut or cortito or cream cheese or sour cream or shredded cheese, jalapenos, fermented jalapenos, um, cilantro. I had some fresh cilantro
Oh, my
yesterday. It's
favorite.
just like the capers from you. Oh,
Yay.
whatever I can find, just kind of put on top and then go sit outside and eat it in the sun. So,
Nice.
so that's what
Oh,
I'll be
you're going to
doing
enjoy
after
that.
this. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
So, if
I like the
anybody's wondering,
sound.
those oat cakes make the perfect platform for turning all the scraps in your fridge into something that just looks like amazing. So, yeah,
Nice.
that's what I had. Did you eat lunch before we got on?
Yeah, I've been home alone today, which is quite
Oh,
unusual.
nice.
Rob's gone into Florence to a studio to mix one of his tracks, his kind of latest track. He's found a friend who's mixing it for him.
Oh, is this
So
the guy he told me about? That's
I
like
think so.
super
Yeah,
smart and cool and like has
yeah,
these special audios where Rob said he can hear things that he could
yeah,
never hear. Yeah,
exactly.
that's so cool.
So yeah, he's been doing that. So I was here on my own, but I decided that I wanted to just cook up some stuff that would feed us also tomorrow.
Yeah,
So
smart.
I'm in the habit of making the last couple of months some burgers that are beef mince and liver together,
Oh,
and I've kind of been honing the recipe. The first ones were nice but a bit oniony, and then I've been working on what herbs and spices I want in them, and I've kind of got it down now into a way that we all like it. It's really really nice, which I think the recipe's going to go in our next cookbook because it's
oh,
good.
good,
So
good.
I made a lot of them this morning and had one for lunch with some kind of carrot and pepper salad. The vegetables are turning here. This probably won't go out this episode till September, but it's actually June. So we're getting into summer vegetables. So I had some pepper. And the ends of 2 breads, one spout, one rye, spread with
Nice.
lard and some sauerkraut. Very nice.
Yum. That sounds perfect. Kind
It
of
was.
similar, our dishes, I guess. We each have sort of a bread and then
Yeah.
a meat, right? And then
Yeah.
a ferment on top.
Yeah.
Typical.
Completely. Completely. Oh. If you're into ancestral eating, you'll know that liver is a superfood. full of vitamin A, K, and a whole host of B vitamins, plus many essential minerals. It has a truly exceptional nutrient profile and is a staple of traditional healthy diets. But it's not always as easy to get liver into our lives as we want. Getting a good supply, knowing how to cook it so it actually tastes good, and getting all of our family to eat it. These things can be hard, especially when we're busy or travelling. That's where Andrea and I turn to liver capsules. They give us the incredible benefits of liver without having to worry about the sourcing, the preparation, or the eating. One Earth Health produces organ capsules from 100% grass-fed New Zealand-raised cattle. As a podcast listener, you can get 5% off and free shipping by using the link oneearthhealth.com/ancestral kitchen. And each time you order, you'll also be supporting us to keep on making the podcast. Details and the link are in the show notes. Okay,
Awesome.
so...
Well, shall we away with our list then?
Yeah.
Because we left everybody on number
Exactly.
23 last
So,
time.
interestingly, we fooled ourselves that we could get this all into one episode. It was just a joke.
Who were we kidding?
Halfway through the last episode, I was like, this is not going to fit in one episode.
This is
And
not gonna
actually, we
work.
only got up to number 23 out of 50 ways. So we're going to
We
start
tried.
with number 24. And like you said, the next few are about stock or broth.
Yeah.
And these bits just deserve their own section in the 50 ways because stock is just an amazing way to save money. So number 24 is just make broth regularly. It's full of protein and so many minerals for literally pennies. I get my bones from Flavio for nothing. I mean, I pay, as we talked about in the last episode, I pay for offal. But every time he kind of adds everything up, just, as we're leaving, just says, oh, the bones, I'll just give you those. So I'm paying, apart from the energy cost, I'm paying nothing for those bones.
That's amazing.
And those, when I have stock with my meals, I'm going to be assimilating my meat better. So it's just an absolute no-brainer. If you want to save money, make broth regularly. Number 24.
lot of people butcher for meat. Like they butcher for the meat. They don't butcher for the fat or for the organs or the bones. And I think we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, but actually I can't remember where the number is. But if you are getting whole, we talked about whole animals, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if you're getting like whole or partial animals, when you talk to the person that's doing the butchering, or the friend you're getting it from, or the butcher who's doing the cut and wrap, or whoever you can talk to, just talk to people about it and be like, hey, I would take any bones or heads or organs that or fat that anybody didn't want. I would take it, because a lot of times they'll be butchering like say our friends, they'll send all 5 of their pigs at once. And the butcher will often ask them, do you want the fat and the things back? And they'll either say yes or no. And then all their customers are like, I don't want the fat. I don't want the heads. I don't want the trotters. I don't want the organs. I don't want the bones. And if you're standing there like, geez, I'd take it, they oftentimes they'll just give it to you. So definitely, if you can ask. And the stuff, I mean, honestly, it's going to get thrown away otherwise. So
we do have an episode dedicated to broth. I can't remember the number, unfortunately, but just scroll back through our numerous episodes now and you will find it. Number 25 is something that I think we mentioned on that broth episode, which was to use the bones again and again. So, for instance, if you have a chicken, you can make meat stock with the whole chicken in water, eat the meat, and then you can make a bone broth with the bones from the chicken. And then you use the bones to feed your animals after that, don't you, Andrea?
Yep.
And so you can use them to feed animals with bigger bones than that. So not chicken, with beef bones or pig bones, lamb bones. You can use those more than once in a bone broth. So you can cook them up once and then you can use them again and get more broth out of them.
So, since we have so many animals right now and we don't really have what one would call a shortage of bones for broth, I haven't been doing this. And that's just because now we raise animals for people and nobody wants the bones, so or whatever, so we have them, right? But um I would cook my bones, strain the broth, start over until I'm like, oh, okay, the water's coming out clear. It's
Yeah.
probably not anything anymore. Like I really worked those things to the ground. And
Yeah.
then I'm sure the nutrition just gets less and less,
Mm.
but whatever. Okay. I was really getting something out of it and it gave me something to cook my rice in and whatnot.
Yeah.
But then
Yeah.
um, also I lost my train of thought. So that's that. I
Okay.
was gonna say
Okay.
something so wonderful, it's gone.
I'm going to move on to number 26 while you
Okay.
recover your train
It'll
of
never
thought,
come back, I'm sure.
which is to drink bone broth with your meals. So there's several reasons for this. The first one is that it'll fill you up, so you don't feel like you want to eat as much. But also, it will give you protein. In beef broth, there are 10 grams of protein per cup of beef broth. And so that is a substantial amount of protein just for a liquid. And you can also drink it as a snack because it will be a cheap snack for you. Virtually mine
Yep.
costs nothing. And it will
Yep.
give you extra protein during the day.
And you can sprinkle in some sauerkraut, poach an egg in it. Like
Mm,
your snack can kind of go as far as you want to go. You could
yeah,
drop a couple rice noodles into it. That's a pretty traditional breakfast for me is broth with whatever I can find dumped in it.
yeah. I've got kind of a
Okay.
similar. I think on my website there's a broth bowl, breakfast broth bowl, which is something kind of
Yeah.
similar, leftover grains cooked in broth
Yeah.
with an egg in it, and then miso sometimes, or coriander, cilantro for you, that kind of thing.
Mm.
So number 27, you added to our list, Andrea. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. Just using your bone broth to cook your
Mm.
pasta and grains in. Um,
Mm.
is going to increase the protein in your meal. And remember, when you look at a lot of ancestral food, there's this modern sort of ideal of our ancestors, like, oh, they would just live these nourished lives and look at this good food they had. And it's like, well, no, they were doing this because they were all starving to death and they needed to extract every little
Mm.
shred of a macro that they could get out of everything. So yeah, cook things in the broth, rice, noodles, if you cook noodles, quinoa, grains, whatever you're cooking. Um, just cook it in the broth because it'll add a little bit. Also, I remembered what I was going to say, Allison. It came walking
Yeah.
back in the room a little late, but I've never done this, but everybody has told me to do it many times. But you can dehydrate your bones, allegedly, and then grind them up and use them as bone powder in the garden. I've never done that.
No, I've never done it too. I don't know how long it would take to dehydrate a bone. How would you know that it's dehydrated?
I
Mm.
tried it. Maybe I should just for
Yeah,
podcast sake.
when you try it, tell me.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the next section is kitchen routine, kitchen cooking, and we're on to number 28. Do
Mm.
remember, as we said in the last episode, that there is a document with all of these listed that will be available. Go check the
Oh
show
yeah.
notes for this episode. So don't
Yeah.
feel like you should write all these down. You don't need to. So, number 28 is cook yourself all of the time. So, literally, just cook. The more that you cook yourself, not buy meals from outside, the more money you will save. And that just seems so simple,
Uh,
but it's
we said
totally
it.
key to saving money.
We said
The
don't eat out.
number
Well,
29, which is
also
yeah,
just the yeah. I think this might be covered in detail somewhere else, but just like by cooking on your own.
mm,
Cook yourself makes it sound like you're gonna put yourself in a pot. But cooking alone doesn't make sense either. But when you are cooking and making things out of ingredients, it tends to be cheaper.
yeah,
So, like not buying pre-made things would fall into this category, I would say. Like,
yeah,
yeah. Okay, keep
completely.
going.
The next thing is something that we talk about really quite a lot in that,
Oh, nobody wants to talk about this.
it's easy to see that, to think, I mean, sorry, that people are eating all these amazing things all the time. Um, but really to save money, and in both of our kitchens, we are not. So number 29 is be prepared to eat similar things most of the time. If you're buying in bulk, like we do, like we talked about in the last episode, I've got like 25 kilograms of sorghum in my house at the moment. I'm eating a lot of sorghum. And I have a set number of things that we do, which because we're cooking all the time, we have to have routines and things that are just, they're down, we've done them because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do anything else. And really,
Hey,
a lot of what we eat is similar all of the time. So that's a really key thing. And we've talked about that quite a lot, haven't we?
I wonder, Allison, I guess we can ask you, the listener,
Mm,
does that come through when we talk about what we eat? And I feel like for
mm,
long stretches of time, it'll just be like the same thing over and over. I'm like, I've
mm,
got nothing new to report. I had the same breakfast again.
mm, mm.
I
Well, I
wonder if it
think
shows if people notice that.
every lunch that I talk about, when you ask me what I've eaten, it's pretty much 95% of the time got the same bread in it and the same lard on top of it. And then there's a vegetable, and then there's some sort of, you know, usually animal protein.
It
Um,
sounds like we're doing something fancy when you add all the adjectives, like, oh, this
mm,
home fermented, whatever. And then went to this farmer and got this. And then, like it at the end of the day, it's just the same thing all the time,
yeah,
But and then we put different miscellaneous ferments on top that,
on top. Yeah.
yeah, make it different.
Number 30 is don't throw away, get used to eating leftovers. And I kind of wanted to give an example of that from dinner
Okay.
last night because, I mean, we cook grains in bulk, quite often millet and sorghum, and put them in the fridge. And then we might have a bit of vegetables that were left over from some sausages I cooked with vegetables that I just put in a bowl. And then we got a bit of salad left over from something else. I've got a bit of broccoli left over that I cooked from, the day before. And so often for our last meal of the day, we would just go in, get some grain out, fry an egg, and then just see what else is in the fridge. There's a bit of fish left over. There's a hard-boiled egg from yesterday, or
Oh, I
there's
love it.
these mushrooms that I cooked before, and we'll end up with, for the three of us, three different meals because we're just finishing up what's in the fridge, and that is a regular. We
Yeah.
really don't throw any food away, and we are eating leftovers like half of the time, I think.
Yeah, technically, when you're eating ancestral, like almost everything's a leftover because you had to
Yeah,
ferment it or something the day before. I just I dumped a lot of stuff out of the fridge yesterday and fed it to the pigs, but I didn't feel bad about it because they're gonna give me bacon later.
yeah,
So
yeah,
exchange
completely.
was even.
Number 31 is kind of a similar theme. Make tomorrow's lunch from today's dinner and plan, and then do that every day. So, so very often, like I did today, I made for my lunch these burgers, and they're going to be our dinner tomorrow, and they're going to be Gable's dinner tomorrow to take to school. So often, I will make one meal and we will enjoy it, and I will purposely make double or triple so that meal can serve us for the next day and often the day after that as well. And that
Yep.
way, you're budgeting more, you're only using energy to cook the meal once, you're saving yourself time, and you can buy things in bigger quantities.
Mhm. Yep.
Did you know we have a Patreon for the listeners of the Ancestral Kitchen podcast? That's right, can't get enough of this? Well, there's more of it over on the Patreon feed, just waiting for you. We have a variety of levels to choose from and a bunch of different benefits to enjoy. Your sponsorship keeps the podcast on the air ad-free and helps us keep buying books to read and talk about on the podcast. And also helps Allison buy bizarre ingredients at the farmer's market so she can ferment them and tell us about them later. Check us out at patreon.com/ancestral kitchen podcast.
Number 32, cook in bulk and freeze.
Yeah,
So
that's mine.
yeah,
I
you do
like that
that a
one.
lot. You talk about that because I know you do that with beans and pulses as well, don't you? Talk about that.
Well, you do it too. Well, you're not really doing
Mm.
it with the bread now, are you? You
No,
kind of got tired
well,
of
I
it.
am with rye. I am with rye,
Okay.
but not with spelt.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I felt, yeah, I could see that. We talked about that, how you liked it better
Mm.
fresh.
Mm.
Um, Yeah, well, it is kind of hard to cook in bulk and freeze when you have a lot of people that you're feeding because,
Mm.
you know, every meal feels like a bulk meal. And then you cook 5 of them and you're like, wow, need a
It's gone.
wash pan to mix this in. But it's worth it. It's worth it. Um,
Mm.
and having frozen meal, ah, man, actually, I don't think I have any in the freezer right now, but nothing beats a frozen meal when you're doing like a long day of chores
Mm.
outside because I get so disrupted when I have to come in and like create a meal. I don't know why. My brain doesn't switch the tasks very well. If any therapists are listening to this, maybe you can call me and help me with that. But when I make like meatloaf, say, or shepherd's pie or something, which I know is shepherd's pie is made out of lamb. Don't come at me for that. Then I like to have it in the freezer. Take it out the night before we have a really big project day, like butchering or something. And then in the morning, I just stick it in the oven, even when the oven's off and cold. And then at some point, I'll either say, "Is go in and turn the oven on," or I'll go in and turn the oven on. And it's like
Mm.
literally that's the only task it took. And then it cooks and it's
And
done.
it's
So
done.
I'd say free. Yeah, if I could have more freezer dinners, that would probably be my one wish. That I could-
Mm.
But I
What's your
should.
favourite? What's your favourite freezer meal? What do you do most often?
Oh, well, shepherd's pie or cottage pie or
Okay.
combination or swineherd's pie, whatever.
Yeah.
That's one we really like because there's a lot of meat in it,
Yeah.
and then there's potatoes on top, and then you can make a fresh bread to go with it if you want to, or you can just not,
Yeah.
and it's fine. So
Okay.
we really like that one. Meatballs is a good one
Yeah.
to have frozen, as we know around
Yeah.
here.
You've got a
Um,
bigger freezer than me, so it's a little
yeah,
bit easier for you. Meatballs I find really effective in the freezer because you put them all in a bag, you can
yeah,
fit them in whatever space you've got in the
you can
freezer. You've
shove
got
them
some weird
in.
space that's the shape
Exactly.
of some kind of slime ball. You can put meatballs in it.
Yeah,
Whereas with a cottage pie, you've got to have an
I
actual kind
know,
of
right?
shelf space in the freezer.
Yeah, yeah. Meatballs is a good one. Meatballs are good.
Mm.
Also, they cook pretty quick. Whenever
Yeah.
I like sometimes we want meatloaf, and I basically I call it like mini meatloaf or meatloaf
Yeah.
patties. So it's like mixed up meatloaf, but then we're just cooking it quickly on the stove.
You
The
know,
little
in the
patties.
Healing Broths and Better Broths and Healing Tonics book that you'll be interviewing the author very shortly,
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
mini meatloaves in there, and they're cooked in muffin tins, in silicone muffin tins, which is a
Oh,
nice
just to
idea.
tease everyone on that, but Colleen was at my house the other day. They camped out here and she was looking through the book and she said, "Man, this book has everything." She goes, "It covers a lot." I said, "I know, it's
Mm.
basically a medical book." And she's like, "Ah, I know. It like covers everything." So it's
So
a
we'll be
really good
having
book.
an
Can't
interview
wait to talk
with the
more.
lady who wrote the
Yeah,
recipes for that book
yeah.
soon. Okay, let's
Okay,
move
where
on.
are we? I'm
Number
lost.
33. We're on number
Okay.
33. Make ferments yourself or with friends. Ferments are
Yeah.
one of the things that can cost us so much in the shop.
Hmm.
And the cost, as you know from if you've listened to our 5 cheapest and most expensive foods episodes, which was one of our very first, we actually broke down the cost of kraut, I think, in there, and then how much it costs to make it yourself. And it's just incomparable. So make your ferments yourself, number 33. Do you want to take number 34, Andrea?
Yeah. Bake at home. This is a, a a little bit redundant, I guess, with cooking at home. But bake at home, your quality baked goods are going to be one of the most expensive value added products you can buy at the store. But if you're baking as a matter of routine or just as a way of your life, like it's not just a vibe to post on Instagram. I hear people say like, "Oh, baking sourdough is, like they categorize it under you know, making macrame or something, like they just do it for fun. But for
Mm,
us, it's a
mm,
really good budget tool because
mm.
buying flour or even grains, even cheaper if you do the grains and grind them. Not everybody has the option, but if you can, that's even cheaper. And
Yeah,
we don't even have to use like packaged juices. I don't know. To me, it's kind of expensive, but um, you can just use your own sourdough start, which you can either follow Allison's instructions for starting one
mm.
or get one from somebody and then follow her instructions for taking care of it.
Yeah.
Allison, we should link that actually. Your course on the 10 what do you
Okay.
call it? 10
I'm
tips
just
for
writing
taking
that
care.
down.
Yeah, because the sourdough start is one of the most effective things you can use in your kitchen for maximizing the nutrition out of a very cheap grain, but also constantly producing something that tastes like super high end, whatever, and doesn't cost you anything more than the grain and the salt that went with it. Like literally.
Yeah,
I
completely.
mean, sourdough is like such a
So
great. I mean,
that course
we
is
didn't put
free.
sourdough start
No,
as a
no, we
saver
didn't,
on
did we?
here, but if you've ever bought
51.
yeast, you know it's pricey. Yeah,
Yeah, we'll put the
sourdough's
link
great.
to that course in the show notes. It's a free course, so you can just go and sign up and access it. I wanted to just add to that literally we would not be able to afford sourdough if we bought sourdough,
No, no
and we
way.
can't not eat sourdough because I mean Rob can't eat anything other than my sourdough or
Yeah,
very very expensive sourdough. He can't
yeah,
eat normal bread, so literally we have to cook our own. We have to bake our
yeah.
own sourdough because we'd be not very well if we didn't have sourdough and we can't afford to buy sourdough at the store. So
I
it's a
should also
no-brainer.
console the reader that this doesn't. A listener, I mean, I'm used to actually writing more than talking, but we should console the listener that I will say I don't bake bread all the time, at least not in the past year.
Mm,
At every, it's not like every other day I get up and mix up a batch or something. Kind of wish I did. Maybe I'll get back onto that rhythm. But incorporating animals was sort of my focus for this year.
mm,
And so bread is a little less frequent, but that's also okay with me, because I've been subbing in like rice or something or the oat cakes, you know.
yeah.
So we've got a bread, if you will.
Mm,
So don't feel like once we start, then I'm basically latched on to making sourdough every Tuesday and Thursday for the rest of forever. Like you could just not have bread for a while. It's
mm,
fine. And then when you're not buying baked goods and you get really creative and you're like, okay, I'm going to make Allison's oat cakes because I want bread with this meal, but I also don't have time to
yeah.
make a loaf. So
Yeah. Completely.
yeah.
Okay. Number 35 and number 36 is related to. And number 35 is render your fat yourself. So tallow and pork fat, lard, and ghee as well. Don't forget ghee. Ghee is very expensive. They're all very expensive, really.
No, so expensive.
But I don't sometimes I don't have the time to do ghee, so I know ghee is very expensive. The other ones I always do. But
Yeah.
just render your fat yourself. It will cut the cost of your fat incredibly. Number 36 is I want a t-shirt with this on. Eat lard.
Yeah.
Eat lard or tallow over butter. What I've seen, when I go into Western price groups or places where people are cooking ancestrally the last couple of years, they've talked about how butter is going up in price humongously. And
Yeah.
yeah, it is. And butter is incredibly more expensive than homemade lard. And you can eat lard like butter. You can fry things in it. Yes, you can cook things in it. You can use it as a greasing fat, but you can eat it on your bread. And I do every day, lard on bread with salt or lard on toast. It's wonderful. And it is a completely different kettle of fish to buying butter and using that every day.
Yeah. Even making butter is expensive here because the cream, even with a cow, there's
Mm,
cream, right?
yeah.
Or I can get raw milk from the farm that we buy it from when the cow's dried up. And
Mm,
but there's so many things that you can make with it. You can do the ice cream with it. You could do sour cream. You can do cream
yeah.
cheese. You know, and
It's a
so then
fight.
you're like, how do I put it all into butter? Like really?
Mm,
And I have really just with the focus of not buying as few fats in as possible, then I've been like just taking anything that has butter in it. I'm like, well, today you get tallow because that's what I have, or today it's going to be lard.
mm,
Um, and or honestly, Allison, we have a mystery fat right now. I rendered a giant bag of fat, and I was like, I don't know what this is. I
interesting.
don't-
We should
it's
do a
either a pig or a
little
cow.
taste test. I wish I could taste
Yeah,
it and try and give you my opinion.
yeah. I'm sure you could tell me.
Mystery fat.
It's, I think it's tallow. Everybody's like, it smells kind of
Okay.
like tallow, but I'm like, it also kind of smells like flour. So I don't know. But
Yeah.
um,
Okay.
it doesn't really matter because it's pretty neutral, and I just use it to make the bread that's in the cookbook, or that
Mm-hmm.
recipe takes like a third of a cup of fat or something, half a cup. I don't know, it's a
Yeah.
lot. And I just use a giant scoop of tallow or lard.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Number 37. Grind your own grain. You mentioned that when you were talking about baking at home. Now, investing in a grinder is perhaps something that is costly at the beginning, but over time, over a number of years of use, you will recoup that money from buying the grain and grinding it yourself.
Yeah.
In addition, you'll be getting more nutrients from the fresh grain than you would be from a flour. It's interesting when you read Weston Price's book, you find that he really focuses in on freshly ground grains. He doesn't
Hmm.
really talk much about sourdough. He doesn't really talk much about processing grains, but he talks about freshly
Yeah.
grinding grains. So
Surprising.
if you can't afford a grinder yet, think about potentially teaming up with someone you know who also wants a grinder and you kind of share it. Or if you know someone with a grinder, can you go over and grind some grains there and give them something that you've made? Um, because that's kind of our ethics of joining together and doing stuff together. Number 37.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll
on to
I'll
number
link
38.
I'll
Mm-hmm.
link John Moody's review on grinders in Weston A.
Ah,
Price.
okay.
I'll put that in the show notes, because then when you're choosing your grinder, he says in there, he's like, get this grinder, it's gonna last you like multiple generations. So
Yeah. Okay, I'm writing that down so we don't forget that. Okay, do you want to go on
thank
with
you.
number 38 while I'm writing?
Yeah, value add your own dairy products. Value added dairy is it even trumps baked goods as the most expensive value added product that you can get. So homemade cheeses and things like that. They we make those on a fluctuating basis based on our time to money ratio at the moment. So the less time I have, sometimes we're focused on projects that earn us money. And so then I happily will buy the cheese that somebody else made. And then sometimes I'm more focused on not spending any money, but I have more time. And so then I put my attention to making things at home. So how much and what things I make is a sort of sliding scale based on where we're at. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember Josh Thomas of the homesteading family with Josh and Carolyn, he was saying on an episode he did when he talked to somebody about that, the guy asked him what saves the most money on a farm. And he said, um, having a cow and establishing your own dairy routine. You don't have to have the cow. Trust me, if you're buying milk from somebody, it's costing the same as keeping the cow. So it's the same difference. But
Mm.
using the raw milk, even he also said, I know not everybody has a cow. So buying raw milk and then making the products out of it, he said that even more money is saved than with their having a giant vegetable garden. So
Mm.
it's a huge impact on your budget to learn how to value add your dairy. And you can either learn through books, or there's people that put out courses. And Allison, I think one day we should put out a dairy book too, because
Mm.
we have so many things that we make. But um, spend a little money if you can on learning how, since you probably, like most of us, didn't grow up with a cow. Well, some of you did, you know, but not all of us did. And learn how to make things. You can make very easy soft cheeses in a day. You can make like 5 kinds of cheese in one day with some of the soft cheeses like ricotta and things like that.
Mm.
You can make things like schmirkes, which is made from clabbered milk without any. You don't have to buy any cultures or anything. And ricotta the same. You just need lemon juice and vinegar, or one or the other. And salt. Those are very easy. Farmer's cheese, you'll have to get rennet for that, but that's a very easy one you can make in one day. And yeah, there's just a lot of things that you can do with your dairy to save money.
Wonderful. And
Yeah.
kind of moving along on that same theme, value adding, make your own luxuries. So the two examples that come to my mind are chocolate and coffee. So you can buy coffee already roasted and already ground in a packet, or you can bulk buy the green beans and roast them yourself on the stove or in the oven. Chocolate, you can buy very expensive bars of chocolate, or you can do what I do, which is buy the beans, roast them, and make your own chocolate.
Well,
So
I
I have a
imported mine from
course.
Italy. My chocolate.
I have a course on how to do that on my website, which is bean to bar chocolate with no special equipment, because most chocolatiers have very, very pricey equipment. And
Oh
I
yeah.
kind
Oh
of
yeah.
challenged myself to making my own chocolate only using the kind of kitchen equipment that most of us already have. That's a really reasonably priced course. It's a recording of a live Zoom that I did, and it will teach you everything you need to know to go from a raw bean to homemade chocolate. So
Yeah.
those are just two examples, but anything that's kind of a luxury, anything that value adds, do it yourself. That's number 39.
And Josh Thomas also pointed out with the coffee, because he said that they get the green coffee too. And he pointed out that part of the reason they do that, aside from the cost savings, is that it saves or it can store for quite a long time
Yeah,
green. And it doesn't store as long or as well once it's roasted. So that was another
completely.
good
It
point.
it loses its flavour after it's been roasted. It
Yeah.
loses its flavour even more quickly after it's been ground
Yeah.
and roasted.
Uh-huh.
And in addition, Um, the already roasted and ground coffee often harbours mould, which you just won't get if
Oh
you're
yeah.
freshly
Yeah.
roasting it. So
Yep.
I think by the time this episode goes out, Rob and I will have done an episode on everyday luxuries,
Oh good.
in which we'll talk about his routine for doing the coffee, because he
Okay.
roasts his coffee from green. So go back and listen to that one, which I think probably would have been about 4 or 5 episodes back if you're interested in doing that.
You should mention Allison too here, just like the chocolate. Rob does it without special fancy giant
Yeah,
roasters and equipment and stuff. So
yeah,
that's one of the
exactly.
coolest things is you guys have opened the gate, if you will, for these luxuries, because exactly like you said, when I tend to think of making chocolate, I'm like, I don't have a tempering,
Mm.
machine. I don't like, you don't have all these fancy things, but you show how to do it just with what you have in your kitchen already, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and that's what I do all the time. I mean, virtually all the chocolate that I eat is chocolate that I've made myself, and
Mm,
97% of the coffee that Rob's drinks is coffee that he's roasted himself from
it's
green.
amazing.
Hey, you washing the dishes. Been there. You've heard Allison and I talk over and over about her love of rye sourdough bread. Well, I might actually call it an obsession, but that's neither here nor there. Now you can make Allison's rye sourdough in your own kitchen with her as your teacher. And she's a really good teacher. Rye is economical, it's delicious, and full of nutrients and low in gluten. There's a reason why it has been a darling of bread bakers for centuries. Make it into sourdough, as Allison will show you in her course, Rye Sourdough Bread, Mastering the Basics. And you've got an amazing, tasty, and nutritious staple in your kitchen. It's traditional and it's nutritional. In this course, you'll learn everything there is to know about how she creates and maintains her rye sourdough starter, all about whole grain sourdough rye, including the key differences between baking with rye and wheat, how to make 2 loaves, an everyday rye sandwich bread, and a delicious Russian-style dark rye loaf, and what to do with your sourdough discard, including video walkthroughs for sourdough pancakes and a tasty, sweet, spiced cake. Head to www.ancestralkitchen.com/rye.
So,
So
yeah.
number 40 is I put this one on invest
Mm.
time and energy and effort in working bees. Get your friends together and do all the hard labor of building your pantries together so you can tackle huge food products that can be obtained at bargain bolt prices together. So for instance, I've gone in with friends and we've purchased like a ton, like as in a metric ton or more of apples at a time. And you get them for so cheap. Whereas if you were to buy just a few pounds, it'd be quite expensive.
Mm.
Things like that can save you a lot if you are okay with coordinating what it takes to team up and get something like that. Usually the more organized you are, the better, because somebody's got to have all the cash up front. People can bring their cash, you got to keep track of who bought how much and things like that. It's not that hard, and it is really fun, and everybody usually feels like they came out ahead. And then I don't think there's anything better than a working bee. I heard somebody talk about this, actually, Allison, just the other day, because I feel like I'm very passionate about working bees.
You are.
And I am. And I heard somebody talk about this the other day, and I thought, well, that's why. And she was saying that there's this idea that we have, this modern idea of a traditional wife who stays at home and cooks and takes care of the kids, and dad goes to work. And she's like, that is realistically an idea that came from a very small sliver of time, like in the 40s and 50s. She
Mm.
said, basically, for all of human history before, you were multi-generational slash some kind of village. Typically, even the homesteads that we think of in America were very abnormal. And women always were working socially with women, and then men worked socially with men. And she said, if you think about it, in this idea of the traditional wife, or what people on the internet's called trad wife,
Mm.
then the man still has his social network with men, even though it's actually women who prefer working socially. And she said, then you have basically this idea of now a woman who stays at home and is like isolated all the time.
Mm.
And And I was thinking that's why the working bees feel so satisfying, because
Yeah.
those videos of, Welsh women working together, or
Yeah.
there's like all these traditional things that women do together.
Yeah.
And when we get together as a group of women and we talk, you're peeling apples for 36 hours straight, you're gonna talk. Like, it all comes out. And we all love to kind of show off and bring a meal, a dish. It's like, let me just spoil the crowd. Somebody's bringing a really nice loaf of bread with some spread they made, and somebody else is like, look at this amazing freezer meal I brought. And so then everybody's eating. The kids are kind of going bonkers somewhere, and you're canning like hundreds of jars of halved pears or something.
Mm.
Like, it's a really good time.
Yeah. I
And
think
it's,
it's a natural kind of
yeah.
instinct for women
Uh-huh.
to work together like that as
What
a
women
social
do
sex.
now for their bees is they're like, I guess, brunch culture, or like go
Mm.
shopping together or something. And honestly, that takes a lot of money and a lot of time. And then the idea is typically like, get rid of the kids so that you can go do that. Well, that's not really an option for me. And for a lot of families, um, if you homeschool, you've got your kids around you all the time. If your husband's in the military or something, you're really not going to like leave the kids with him and go somewhere because he's, overseas or whatever.
Mm.
It's just not always an option. And I prefer things that organically fit my life. So getting women together and saying, hey, let's have a really good work day, or even it's really fun when it's like 3 days in a row and everybody just shows up in the morning for like 3 days. You're like,
Mm.
this is such a good time. Um,
Nice.
but then you all feel super productive. And
As well. Yeah.
yeah, and if you told like if you told your husband, "Oh, I'm just gonna go hang out with my friend for 3 days," they'd be like, "Okay, weird. Like, what? But what about work? What about our house? But if you're like, I'm gonna go every day to this friend's house for 3 days and spend 12 hours, and at the end of it, we're gonna have
Yeah.
50 quarts of stew that we can just pull off the shelf at any time and have dinner." He's like, "Yeah, please go now, hurry."
Yeah.
So, anyways,
Yeah.
but yeah, you can also save money. So yeah,
Let's
save
go
your
on to the
sanity.
next five.
Okay.
We're up to, that was number 40. So the next five are home tasks. Number 41 is grow your own. And I know that we've got such a selection of listeners to the podcast. Some of them have acres and acres of land, which they're producing their own food on. And some of them, have a balcony or a windowsill, and that's it. And I think it's important to state that, grow your own doesn't necessarily not apply to you if you don't have a garden. It doesn't have to be big. We have a small garden here that I've talked about before, which is paved over. But I grow a lot of herbs. I've always got maybe somewhere between 10 and 12 different herbs in the garden. And herbs can be one of the most expensive things to buy for the kitchen. We talked about them in the last episode. And so I'm growing my herbs, so I can just go downstairs into the garden, cut some oregano or pineapple sage or mint, and bring it up and include it in my dinners. And that's saving me money. Obviously, the bigger you get, the more you can scale up, but it doesn't have to be big. If you don't have space, don't think that you can't do that bit yourself. Number 42 kind of is the same thing, but on a bigger scale, raise animals. And Andrea, you probably want to talk about this a bit to say how that can save you money.
It can and it cannot. There's, it can be very expensive to raise animals. And you can do it more inexpensively, but there are ways, and you can also collaborate with people too. I always think it'd be so awesome if somebody said that they wanted 50 chickens for their family. They don't have the space to grow them, but I have the space to grow them. I would totally love to collaborate with someone, and they're like, okay, we'll come out and do some work on the farm and help butcher and things like that. And then at the end of the day, if they just paid for the feed for the birds, right, we'll take care of them and everything. Like, I feel like collaborations like that would profit everybody,
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and
Yep.
raising an animal, mainly if you're intending to use every single part, is where you're going to find a lot of your savings.
Yeah. Okay. Number 43 is kind of along what you were just saying, and we're saying on point 40,
Yeah.
share tasks with friends. So you were talking about working bees and preserving, but literally just cooking together. So one night a week, go over to a friend's house, cook together, eat together, make twice as much in less than half the time because you've got 4 hands instead of 2 hands.
Yeah.
And if then your friend comes over to your house another night a week and does the same, you're going to spend time together, like Andrew was talking about, which can be very rich. And you're also going to be spending less time and making more food, which
And even if you
is
didn't do it, even if you weren't doing it together, there's still a value. And if you live in town, this is probably the easiest. Actually, a lot of things you're like, oh, I don't live in the country, so I can't have a cow or whatever. But there's a lot of things you can do in town. And one thing that we did when we lived in Virginia, we lived in a like we just became very close with our neighbors. And there's 3 of us women, and one of them would cook basically 3 families worth of dinner, and then
yeah,
you would just either walk over and get a pan, or she'd walk it over or something. And
nice.
then the next night I would cook kind of 3
Mm,
families, and it wasn't really organized or sorted. We just kind of did it. Like, I would call, like, you know what, I'm cooking 2 chickens, you guys down? um and we had smaller families. Each of us had 1 child at the time, so it was not too overwhelming by any means. And I remember thinking, all around America, everybody's in their house alone cooking
yeah,
dinner every single day. And we were alternating between the 3 of us, and it felt like I was never having to work. And
mm,
if I did make dinner, I was like, oh, I can't wait till they tell me how much they love this. Like, this is so fun. They're gonna be so delighted. Like, oh, I would get feel like adventurous because I wasn't doing it all the time. So I had more creative effort to put into
yeah,
it. And we were also all sort of relying on, I was working on a farm, and I would bring home cases of free food basically. So we would rely on that to make our meals. And so it really felt spiritually and physically
mm,
nourishing.
that's nice. So
Yeah.
44 is something that we've kind of talked about a lot through the different points that we've had so far. Andrew, do you want to talk to number 44 and number 45?
Okay, 44 is just skill up. So the more skills you have, the more you can say yes to. So if somebody calls you and says, I've got 5 live roosters, you can have them if you can take them alive. Then you can say yes, because that's a ton of free meat, bone broth, and organs for your dinner table. But you have to know how to butcher them. If
Mm,
somebody says, can you glean, you can come and glean my apple orchard if you want, and you can take home 400 pounds of apples. You're either like, okay, kids, we're like eating 1,000 apples a day for the next month, or you can process those apples to be
mm,
fruit and sweetness for the table for a whole year with your skills canning and dehydrating and processing.
mm,
Or if you're getting your meat back from a butcher and the friend who sent her hogs in to be butchered says, do you want all 5 of the pig heads? And if you know how to make those into blocks of head cheese, then yes. And Allison, you had said, things like, can you cook spleen?
Yeah, we had
Um,
exactly an example like that where we went to get some goat's milk, and the farmer just said to us, "I've got this spleen from the goats that we slaughtered this morning. Do you want it?" And we were like, "Yes." And because I knew how to cook
yeah.
spleen, there's a Tuscan kind of delicacy of spleen on toast, like an antipasto.
Wow.
Because I knew what to do with it, I could cook the spleen, and we got it for nothing. So it's such a similar thing to what you were saying.
Right. And sometimes you can just learn these. If you can get yourself enmeshed with somebody who has skills, you can learn skills from somebody. You can learn a lot on the internet.
Mm,
And I think it's also worth paying if you wanted to take a class on something. I think that is totally worth it. The energy, excuse me, the energy of the person teaching is worth exchanging some energetic cash
mm,
um, for that value. And then you will have that skill for the rest of your life, and you can reap your investment rewards over and over
mm,
forever and teach it to your kids.
indeed.
45 is force yourself to work from your pantry, even if it's just for a month. I said force specifically for a reason because if I just said work from your pantry, it's like, yeah, duh, what do you think the pantry is for? But I used to give myself challenges where if you're preserving and things a lot, sometimes you start to realize you've got a lot in your pantry and then you go and buy something anyways. And so I would say, I can only buy, at the time we didn't have a cow and we didn't have eggs. So I would say I can only buy dairy and eggs. I would just give myself this challenge. And it's kind of like we talked about in the creativity episode, Allison,
Mm,
where I felt that restricting myself expanded my skill and my
mm,
creativity a
mm,
lot. So I'd say I have to cook out of the pantry only. And wow, I would get so crazy creative
mm,
and I would just use things out of the pantry. Now I see things called pantry challenges that go out where they say, oh, we're challenging you to only eat out of your own pantry. And depending on how much you put up, some people are like, for a week, for a month, for a year, just eat out of your own pantry. Um, but yeah, that's the fun one. Just make
nice.
make a challenge and use stuff up.
Okay, so we're in the final stretch now. We're into the other section where we've put a
Here
load
we
of
go.
different things. So
Other.
number 46 is use bokashi, which we have an episode on, fermenting waste in the kitchen, which will give you a soil improver. And I've done that, and it's meant I haven't had to buy compost to put in my pots in my garden. So go back to that episode if you want to know more about bokashi. We also have in the show notes a discount on bokashi supplies. So if you do decide you want to go ahead, you can
Oh
get a
yeah.
discount to help you get started. Okay, do you want to give us the last 4 and take us to the finish line, Andrea?
Okay. Wait, I have 5 on my list left.
Oh,
What did I do wrong? What happened?
we're up to number 47. Yeah?
Okay. All right. Say yes. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. That's where I
Okay.
am anyway.
47 is say yes always. I always say yes to jars, any shape, size, or dirtiness. Okay. I've had to like crawl into people's barns and dig them out, but I always say yes. And I've got, well, yeah, thousands of jars. But that also means I have them for the working bees. And if I want to send somebody home with a dozen quart jars and that's the beginning of their collection, it doesn't really cost me anything because I always say yes if someone offers me free jars. I say yes to any food. This is a funny one that people say, yeah, but we don't eat stuff like this or that. And I'm like, I know, but say yes anyways, because then they know you will always say yes. And I have said yes. And then I get something, I'm like, this isn't really something. I've passed it along either to a food pantry, to somebody else that I know. Some things I'm in like, I think this is just garbage. I've thrown some things away. Um, but I always say yes. And then I end up with people calling me and giving me the most
Mm,
insane, like, would you like my entire organic Azure bulk dry pantry of like tons and tons of 5-gallon buckets of things for
wow.
free because I'm moving and I'm not taking it with me. And, I had 8 kids. And so I have a lot and stuff like that. And they just give it to me because they know I'll say yes.
Mm.
That's, I don't even know how much free food we've gotten
Mm.
that way. And sometimes you have to sift through it. Sometimes you have a lot of processing to do, like at the drop of a hat. But at the end of the day, um, I've come out miles ahead with some really wonderful things that I'm thinking of are literally in my pantry right now that people have given
Wow.
us. So
Wow.
yeah, that's a good one. Um, what is number? Okay, now I don't know what I did to
Mm.
my list that I have different numbers than you. So you
Okay.
you say what is the next one?
Okay, so number 48 is at the same time reduce your staples to the absolute core that you need and just choose items that you can source around you. So then you're relying on things that you can buy in bulk, and that becomes your kind of staple. Should I carry on with number 49?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. And if somebody wants to see um, how Allison does that, get the cookbook. My my pantry is much longer than hers,
Yeah.
and I actually told her in the creativity episode that I was really happy when I saw hers because I've been slowly reducing what I keep in my pantry.
Mm.
Um, Partly why I have a lot is because two people have given me their entire pantries when they moved, which has been a huge blessing for a family.
Yeah.
Um, but um, don't feel like you have to have a lot on hand because that's a lot to maintain. And just like a grocery store, the more that you keep on the shelf, the more you have to pay attention to
Yeah.
things expiring and
Yeah.
not, I mean, obviously we don't really think about food expiring like that, but you know what I mean? You
Mm.
have to be aware of things and replenish them. And it's just easier to have a smaller pantry.
Yeah. Number 49 is don't be afraid to ask.
Mhm.
And Andrea you wrote this one. If food is being left, ask if it's okay to take it. Do you want to give some
Yeah.
examples of that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many examples. One of the best ones was one time I was walking on a boardwalk and there was a 5K and it was the end of the 5K and I saw cases of bananas and oranges. And so I just found someone who looked like they're doing know what they're doing. They had a clipboard and I was like, "Can I take these?" And they're like, "Yeah," because they're just gonna take it all to the dump. So then I kept track when that race came back the next year. And I went out at like 4 o'clock in the morning and found the organizer. And I was like, "Hey, when the race is done, can I come and clean up everything that's left?" And she was like, "Please, for the love, do that." And so we got thousands of bananas. And I called all my moms and I was like, "Hey, everybody, come to my house, get bananas for your family, get oranges for your family." Um, and they came. I mean, it was insane. And I froze so many bananas and I dehydrated hundreds and hundreds
Mm.
of bananas. And
Mm.
they literally lasted us for like 4 years. So don't be afraid to ask.
I think that's
And if
what
it,
what the lady said to you. Yeah, please come and take them. I think often we
yeah,
think, oh, I'm going to be in the way or I'm being cheeky. I shouldn't ask this.
totally.
But
I
from
felt
your
that. I did.
experience, people often want because it
Yeah.
wants to get rid of it because it means they don't have to
Yeah.
deal with it.
Yeah.
So
And
the
they
key
might
there is
say,
don't be
"No, it's
afraid.
going to a food bank," or "No, we're not
Yeah, well,
allowed." They
fair
might say
enough.
that. But okay, you lost nothing by asking. So
Yeah,
you
completely.
can also ask I know I've done this and I have friends who've done this. If you drive by a property and every time you go by, you just see the fruit piling up on the ground underneath their trees, very politely and respectfully, you could go and ask, "Hey, is it okay if I glean your trees?" And I would say whenever I do something like this, I usually bring something for the owner, like something
Yeah,
I baked, or I bring them
yeah.
back some jars or whatever I made, and they appreciate that. Sometimes they're like, "I don't want anything, just take it and
Mm,
please go." Um, Sometimes they're very delighted. "Oh, your kids are so cute. Oh, I remember I grew up on a farm and all." And also, if you're always kind with people, if you're not like a meanie all the time, then they're not like, "Oh, that was that rude neighbor that always flips me off when they go by." Like be nice to people generally. It'll come back and
that's a great
bless you
philosophy
later.
in life. Be nice to people.
Be nice so you can get free apples.
Okay, number 50. Woohoo!
Da da da. The
Reallocate
end.
budget. You came up with this one, Andrea. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. This is just a shift, I think, in priorities, which Allison, you and I, and probably our
A lot
listeners
of
have
people.
also, I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of our listeners have also
Yeah.
done this. Um, which is, instead of entertainment, what about edutainment? So instead of going out and just being entertained, what if you went out and learned how to butcher chickens, cheese making classes, or whatever? What about, instead of movie subscriptions online, you had a milk subscription and you were getting milk from a small farm, or a skill set subscription? Like, there's some farmers and then Patreons like ours and things like that, where you can learn things from their resources and their wisdom on a
Mm,
monthly basis.
mm.
That is, yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people are already doing, but
Yeah.
thinking about it very consciously. How is my time and money
Being spent.
being spent?
Yeah.
And can I reallocate it into something that's going to serve us,
Yeah.
and also bring you just as much fun? Ah, I would so much rather spend 3 days with you, canning, crying into the kitchen towel, laughing, literally falling on the floor, crying, laughing, bruises from laughing so hard, you know, then and walk away with all that blessing, then spend 3 days
Yeah.
going to Disneyland
Oh
or
gosh,
whatever.
yeah.
Like, yeah, you're like, oh yeah.
And you'd have to pay me to go to Disneyland, I think.
But you know
A
what I
lot of
mean?
money.
Like,
Yeah.
that that is more fun. And raising up your family to think that that is fun too, to know that it's fun, and
Yeah. Yeah.
to savor and put the extra effort into the fun dish you're bringing, to share with everyone, and bringing water guns for the kids or whatever, like making sure that everybody feels the appeal of that time spent together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that would
And
probably be my last.
I wanted to share with listeners that when Andrew and I plan episodes together, we often use the wonderful technology that is Google Docs. And Andrea was
Yep.
typing some things into the plans for this episode, unbeknownst that I was actually in the same document, like thousands and
Yeah.
thousands of miles away. And
I had no idea.
she wrote in capital letters at the bottom of this episode plan, "Eat like a peasant." And I saw that and I thought, oh, so I typed in, we should write a book called this. Because basically that's what we've said through all of these points, all the 50 ways.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
simple, repetitive, rustic, food that surrounds you, really good quality.
Uh-huh.
It's eating like a peasant. And people, like you said, people ate that way in the past because they had no choice. But
Yeah.
if you compare that to the industrial system, we do have a choice now, and we can choose
Right.
health and wealth far beyond money and
Mhm.
being together and nourishing our bodies, or we can choose something else, which
Yeah.
obviously I
And
don't want us to.
if we put this in the title, everybody would be like, but I'm not wealthy. But I would say, eat like a wealthy peasant. And I would say, if you're listening to this and you aren't dizzy from hunger, you're wealthy.
Yeah.
Like, that's that's what throughout history would have categorized you as the ultra wealthy, was you weren't dizzy from
Yeah.
hunger much of the time, and you weren't like starving, and some of your children hadn't starved. So a wealthy peasant would be somebody who could have this simple food every day,
Mm,
and not die in winter. So we're
mm,
wealthy peasants. There we go.
yeah. And there's
Wealthy
one other
peasant is
thing
the new
that,
term for middle class.
before I ask you what your one thing is, your
Mm,
one money saving tip, I want to just say that all of the things we've talked about, so many of the things talk about, require time. And we know that because both of us spend the time, and the people who are listening to us know so very well because they spend the time doing that. And I think to a great extent, we have the choice in life. We can work more and therefore own more, then earn more, and then we have less time and we buy more. Or we can work less, which means we're earning less, but we have more time, so we get to create more. Really,
right.
to
Sometimes
to
we,
to a great extent, it's that.
yeah,
But we've shared through a lot of those tips that there are ways that you can create more time, getting all the family involved,
right.
doing work beats, batch processing things, working with friends. using the phone less. We haven't talked about that, but we've got a whole nother episode
Oh
on
dear.
that way back in
That
the
could have gone on
archives.
this as a money-saving tip,
Yeah, yeah.
literally. Because
So
people use their phone and then they think they don't have time to bake bread.
exactly.
I mean, I do
The
that.
stuff that goes on in our kitchen on a weekly basis requires an incredible amount of time, and it's very difficult to make people who don't eat in this way or cook 3 meals a day understand that we need a lot of our time just at home making food. And I mean, a lot is an understatement.
That's true.
So
That's
we
true.
have to say no to other things. We have to say no to things sometimes that Gabriel wants to do. We have to say no to
Yeah.
going out because we prioritize this, and it takes an incredible amount of time, but we just wouldn't have it any other way. So
But it's
it's
protective, Allison. It really is, because when you think about the fact that what you just said, we say no to things that sometimes we want to do. We
mm,
also, with the luxury of, prepared food or whatever, we say yes to more than we should.
yeah,
And then we're like, oh, I'm just
yeah,
going crazy. I'm
exactly.
like going bonkers.
Yeah.
But when you're actually forced, I'm like, well, I gotta go home and like massage my sauerkraut. It's like, okay. So, I don't want to. Sometimes, Allison, we also have to work more and we don't make more. Like that. That
Yeah,
sometimes
that,
happens too. There's
I
people
agree with
who
that.
feel
Yeah,
like I'm working a million hours a week and
yeah,
I don't. You know, don't I want to make sure that nobody walks away feeling like we're saying you have to do everything has to be perfect. Maybe the one thing you do is you're like, and what I do is I render lard. Like that's
mm,
what I do. Okay. That's that's huge. That's a step. And that's, go back to the 20 steps, hopefully to feel encouraged that we don't have any pie in the sky sort of illusions. But another thing to acknowledge, Allison, that I heard somebody say this on a different podcast when they were talking about how their life was centered around movement. They said, on the one hand, I recognize, how privileged I am that I get to spend this much time cultivating movement every day. And they said, on the flip side, I had to create this life. And
yes, yes,
I didn't live in a life that allowed this. And so I had to
yes,
painfully and consciously change everything about my
yes,
life to get to this
yes.
point.
I so resonate with that. I mean, people often say to Rob and I, "Oh, well, you get to be at home all day and you get to do this," and you just don't know what someone's life is like or how they got to that point unless they've shared all that with you.
Yeah.
We have been consciously creating the life we're living together for 12 years, individually for more years than that. It's like 20 years since I quit my job at Microsoft. And,
Uh-huh.
we're not there yet. We
Mm.
still have many challenges in many areas of our life. We're still working on it. But it, just like that person that you heard talking about movement, we've had to craft our life to get to this point. We didn't just all have all this time available to do this. And
Right.
thinking about the 50 ways, I mean, we're not doing them all. No,
Mhm.
absolutely no way. And there's plenty in there that is
Right.
available for me to move into as and when more space becomes available. So
Mm.
yeah, certainly don't feel like you have to do all of them because
Yeah.
neither of us is doing 50 of them. But
Some of
pick
these
which
you
one
do
works
more
with
than
you.
me, or I don't. Yeah. Yeah. You and I each pull from these in different ways,
Yeah,
and we live
exactly.
in
Yeah.
different places and different modes of living and
Life.
things like
Yeah.
that. And then both of us, I can see that things that I do that you could tap into and things you do that I can tap
Yeah.
into that I just haven't made the effort to. So,
Yeah. Well, if we lived next door, I'd be passing you across coffee and chocolate, and you'd be
yes,
passing
and
me
I'll be
across
passing
some
you
dairy.
livers.
Yeah, and livers from the butchering. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So tell me, out of all these
All
50
right.
ways, if you could just do one thing to save money, what would it be?
My answer is 100% skill up.
Hmm.
Learn skills. Skills in the kitchen will change your life.
Okay. That's
The
nice.
more skills you can pull in, the richer everything becomes, and the more money you can save, because
Yeah.
skill is what costs the most in food.
Yeah, you're right. Value add.
Hmm. And what's your
Yeah.
one thing, Allison?
Oh, it was so hard when I tried to think about what my
Yeah,
one thing was. It was
me
so
too.
hard.
Yeah.
And I
Okay.
think it has to be virtually the simplest thing. Just make broth. It
I
is
love it.
just nothing. It costs nothing. And it
I
is
love it.
so rich with nutrients and the ability to fill you up and proteins and what your body needs. And it can make
Yeah.
so many different dishes taste so much better. It can make plain rice, plain sorghum, your lentils that you're cooking just taste amazing too, as well as having all those extra nutrients in. And
Uh-huh.
it's just it's a staple for a budget kitchen, I think, for a budget ancestral kitchen. So make broth.
I just listened to an episode. Actually, Allison, I was going to send it to an email today.
Mm,
But it's a woman who I followed for many years who was a vegan for
mm,
probably, I don't know, since she was 18. So for a long time.
mm,
And she just recently stopped being vegan and also stopped labeling herself as anything. And she started incorporating animal foods back into her diet.
mm,
And she said, I'm making bone broth for I'm like learning
mm.
this year, like how to make bone broth. And she said, I'm sitting up here recording this right now, and there's bone broth downstairs on the stove, and I feel like I have a chocolate cake waiting for me. Because it's that good. It's that rich. It checks a lot of boxes in your body when you consume it. So yeah, I think
Mm.
it's a really good one to pick.
Nice. Okay, well, I think our epic is
Epic.
finished.
For
I hope that
listeners,
it's
it's
been
home.
helpful. I hope it's been really helpful. And do remember that there is the PDF, so go into the show notes and check out how to download that. And as always, we're available for comments, thoughts. We'd love to hear the ways that you're saving money in your ancestral
Yeah.
kitchen.
I bet our listeners have a lot that they could add to this.
Yeah,
They're
do
probably
share.
thinking, wow, they got to the end and never even said, they probably
Yeah.
got a lot that they could put on here. So let's hear it.
Yeah.
Let's catalog these ideas and help people understand that eating like a peasant and eating out of the area where you are not only is more sustainable for the planet, but it can be more sustainable for your budget as well.
Yeah,
And definitely, definitely for your body.
indeed. Okay, thank you very much, Andrea.
All right, Allison, I'll talk to you next time.
Yeah, we'll do. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth, and Alison's at Ancestral_kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration, and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.